friend Shirley Schmuck, the Gold Star Medal herself, asked me if I would speak here today. I must admit, I don't do well at this kind of engagement, so forgive me if my voice cracks. A kind of tribute like this always makes me weep for the fallen and their families, and the memories of the day I unwillingly became a Gold Star mother. Okay. Often the question has been asked, what is a Gold Star mother? Who are Gold Star families? And what is the flag of the star symbol hanging in your window for? I really get choked up at first trying to formulate the answer without breaking all the barriers I've built since I became a Gold Star mom. Then I try to answer without sadness and pain, but with all the pride I can muster. It means I lost my son in Iraq, Sergeant Travis Pfister. He was a Marine, a crew chief on a CH-46, C-9 helicopter. I watched the reactions that go from shock to sadness, sometimes tears to wanting to know more, or just being unable to speak, not knowing what to say. I'm sorry for your loss, I hear, and get many a heartfelt hugs from those who are truly touched by my answer. I once was told that God only lends you his children for a short time. That stuck with me. I didn't realize how short of time that was to be. The idea of the Gold Star, the honor and glory according to serviceman and woman for their supreme sacrifice for their country. During the early days of World War I, service flags hung in the windows and contained a deep blue star that was used to represent each person, man or woman, in the military service of the United States. As the war progressed and our troops were killed in combat or wounded and died of their wounds or disease, there came about the acceptance of the American mothers who superimposed the Gold Star upon the Blue Star in such a manner as to entirely cover it. It was the last full measure of devotion and pride of the family in this sacrifice, to be used rather than the sense of personal loss. The service flag is still displayed in our homes of our military families to indicate the number of members of the family who are serving or who have paid the ultimate sacrifice, and continue to be used in reference to American military engagements since that time. Countless mothers have stood in my place many years before me, too many to count, and every name on that wall is a family's name that has endured this tragic loss. It's very unnerving, and when you realize how many Gold Star families there are. Those families have felt what I have felt, and my family has felt. That there is just a strong amount of pride as there is lost sadness. It's said 1 out of every 10 Americans who served in Vietnam was a casualty. Over 58,000 were killed, and over 300,000 wounded out of 2.7 million who served. Although the percent that died is similar to other wars, amputations or crippling wounds were 300% higher than in World War II. 75,000 Vietnam veterans are severely disabled. Medevac helicopters flew nearly 500,000 missions. Over 900,000 patients were airlifted, nearly half of them Americans. The average time lapse between taking wounded to the hospital was less than 1 hour, that golden hour. As a result, less than 1% died of all Americans wounded who survived in the first 24 hours. Vietnam, 1967. The new Boeing CH-46 C-9 helicopters arrived. The CH was known as the Frog and was to be used by the Marines for transport of combat troops, equipment, supplies, and medical evacuation. In October of that year, HMM 364 redeployed to the Republic of Vietnam. These tandem rotor birds were the same helicopters flown in Iraq. Not just the same model, but the same exact helicopters. By deployment time in Iraq, Triple Foxes have been flying them for more than 30 years. HMM 364 pilots and crew flew almost 70,000 hours in combat and combat support missions. During fox name from a cartoon purple fox mascot called Swifty. They created a business card with their mascot, Swifty, and the words, "This trip, courtesy of HMM 364, the Purple Foxes." They handed them out to the soldiers they transported or checked them into a pocket of the wounded being medevaced. In 2003, the Vietnam-era Foxes created an updated version for the mission in Iraq. It still included a picture of Swifty, but this time it read, "Swifty says, give a shit. This ride brought to you by the world famous Purple Foxes of HMM 364. Sure, it's the oldest pig in the fleet, and yes, it leaks a lot, but you ain't walking." They say history repeats itself. On February 7, 1969, there had been 2 helicopter crashes that day. The first, HMM 265, crashed into Da Nang Harbor. 3 perished while trying to swim ashore. First Lieutenant John Cromwell, pilot. First Lieutenant Ray Glover, co-pilot. Gunny Sergeant Wallace Bergstrom, gunner. The second crash, HMM 364 Meg. 16 Purple Foxes. Was shot down while attempting a medical evacuation of wounded Marines. Pilot Captain Ernest Bartolini. Co-pilot First Lieutenant Russell Moak. Crew Chief Corporal Charles Miller. Gunner Lance Corporal Rodney Shank. Corpsman HM2 Walter Terrell and HN Gary Norman Young. Iraq. With combat operations in Iraq, HMM 364 continued to pass back transport and logistical support for Marine Corps. February 7, 2007, HMM 364 Mag 39 Purple Foxes assigned to Marine Medium Helicopter Squadron 364. The squadron based at Camp Pendleton and attached to Marine Aircraft Group 39, 3rd Marine Aircraft Wing in Miramar Marine Corps Air Station, was shot down on a CASEVAC mission while making a much-needed blood run, supporting combat operations in Al-Anbar, Providence, Iraq. Same month, same day, 38 years later. Crew, pilot Captain Jennifer Harris. Co-pilot, First Lieutenant Jared Landacre. Crew Chief, Sergeant Travis Pfister. Crew Chief, Sergeant James Torina. Corpsman, Gilbert Maneras. Corpsman Manuel Ruiz. Corporal Thomas Saba. This was to be their last flight before returning to stateside and had taken the request to do a return blood run to the area they had just previously performed a medevac mission from. They were carrying the flag to be given to the daughter of HN Gary Norman Young, 364 Purple Fox that died in a crash on February 7, 1969. When the chopper went down, the U.S. Army 3rd Platoon and Marine Recovery was immediately dispatched to the area to search for survivors and secure the crash site. They worked their way into the area in a high-risk clearing the roads of IEDs. They recovered the remains of our 7 Marine aviators that day, but on returning the next day to recover the aircraft, an IED struck, killing Sergeant Fulton and PFC Warner instantly. Sergeant Ross Clevenger was rushed to the OP, where a helicopter met him and flew him to Fallujah Surgical Camp, but it was too late. Thus, Ross's parents, who live here in our area, are too a part of the Gold Star family. I'd like to read a personal perspective from a Marine. His name is Michael Ryerson. He was in the Marine Corps from 1965 to 1969 and did 2 tours in Vietnam from February 1966 to 1968. This is what he wrote. I wrote The Man in the Doorway for a friend, Bruce Hunter, who is a crew chief in Northern I Corps. It is meant to celebrate the one abiding image we all brought home from Vietnam. It was hot and dirty, and we saw people hurt and killed. And in the end, it had changed us all. The helicopters, of course, were everywhere, every day. Someone's life is being saved by helicopter crew, either because they brought their guns and rockets or because they brought a medevac into a hot LZ. They came in low and hot, close to the trees, and dropped her tail in a flare, rocked forward, and we rushed for the open doorways. This was always the worst for us. We couldn't hear anything, and our backs were turned to the tree line. Best we could hope was for a sign from the man in the doorway, leaning out, waiting to help with a tug or lay down some lead. Sometimes you could glance quickly at his face and pick up a clue as to what was about to happen. We would pitch ourselves in head first and tumble against the scuffed, riveted aluminum, grab for a handhold, and will the son of a bitch into the air. Sometimes the deck was slick with blood, or worse. Sometimes it had been left in the shadows of the wet sea. Sometimes they landed in the shallow river to wash them out. Sometimes they were late. Sometimes they were parked in some other LZ, with their rotors turning a lazy arch, a ghost crew, strapped in once too often, motionless, waiting for their own lift, their own bags, once too often into the margins. The getting on and the getting off was the worst for us, but this was all he knew, the man in the doorway. He was always standing there in the noise, watching, urging, swinging out with his gun, grabbing the black plastic and heaving, leaning out and spitting the taste away as though it would go away. They came in low and hot, close to the trees, and dropped their tail in a flare, rocked forward, and began to pick the boxes out, bouncing against the skids, piling up on each other. Food and water and bullets. 1,000 pounds of SIGs, warm water and rounds. 7.62 millimeter. Half a ton of life and death. And when the deck was clear, we would pile the bags, swinging them against their weight, and throw them through the doorway, his doorway, onto his deck, and nod. He'd speak into his little mic, and they'd go nose down and lift their tail. Their last flight, their last extraction. Sometimes he'd raise a thumb, or perhaps a fist, or sometimes just a sly, knowing smile, knowing we were staying and he was going, but also knowing he'd be back. He'd be back in a blink, standing in the swirling noise in the rotor wash. Back to let us know, and to let us rush through his door and skid across his deck and will that son of a bitch into the air. They came in low and hot, close to the trees, and dropped their tail in a flare, rocked forward, picked out the boxes, and slipped a litter across the deck. Sometimes he leaned down and held the IV and brushed the dirt off a bloodless face, or hold back the flailing arms and the tears. A thumbs up to the right seat, and you're only minutes away from the white sheets and the saws and the plasma. They came in low and hot, close to the trees, and dropped their tail in a flare, rocked forward. We never hear that sound again without feeling our stomachs go weightless. Listen just a bit closer for the gunfire, and look up for that man in the doorway. The Columbia Basin Veterans Coalition dedicated a transitional house to Army PFC Daniel Wagenaar, who was mortally wounded on July 1st, 1969 by hostile forces in Vietnam, and my son, Sergeant Travis Pfister. It was a home for the returning veterans to give them time to adjust to the changes from military to civilian. Travis's passions run deep for his family, his friends, and country. He would be proud of the care given to his fellow soldiers in his name. A tribute such as this one behind us reminds you again that they are not alone.